After some time, Pac, Noah, and Kyle arrive in the capital of the kingdom. The couple is met by a large squad of specialized fighters and detectives. A young girl named Penelope is Renaud's subordinate. A bureau employee asks Eleanor to surrender all her weapons. Noah is perplexed, and at that moment investigator Kyle steps in for the protagonist. Penelope continues to insist on examining the dangerous criminal. Puck goes into a rage and the ground beneath their feet begins to crack. Renaud quickly leads the protagonist away and they get into the car. The young girl begins to apologize to the detective. Noah claims she is unable to control the Black Dragon's magic under stress. It turns out from the moment the protagonist created a bond with the cute boy, their emotions and thoughts are now connected. Kyle decides to take the child into his arms to give the protagonist some respite from the powerful magical power of the Black Dragon. Will is very happy about this because he trusts the detective. After a while, Noah and Renaud arrive at the National Bureau of Investigation building. The maid unloads the main character's luggage. Pac insists on taking the suitcase himself, and at that moment, the young girl drops the luggage. Suddenly, the maid falls to her knees and sincerely apologizes to the cruel and cold-blooded Eleanor Asil. Noah is perplexed, but the investigator claims that such behavior is normal when a dangerous criminal is standing nearby. When the couple enters the building, they are greeted by the Minister of Finance. The elderly man begins to mock the protagonist in every possible way. Because of this, Noah becomes irritated again, but at that moment the Emperor appears. A man welcomes Kyle and Eleanor. The ruler realizes that it was a dangerous criminal who took possession of the legendary Black Dragon egg. Renaud informs that Asil is ready to cooperate and promises to solve the case of the egg theft. At that moment, the finance minister starts yelling at the protagonist again. Park becomes enraged and, unexpectedly, she has the idea to kill the elderly man. Kyle manages to calm the girl down. When the protagonist realizes that the idea of killing a man has crossed her mind, Noah goes into shock. The Emperor asks the minister to calm down and treat Eleanor Asil with respect. The ruler of the kingdom thanks the protagonist in helping the investigation and shows her the respect she deserves. When the Emperor leaves, Puck asks Kyle for forgiveness. At that moment, Renaud suggests that the protagonist stay without Mayul for a little while longer. The man claims that the Emperor's palace will take decent care of the sweet boy. The Black Dragon and Puck were against it, but after a brief persuasion from the detective, the pair agree. Mew reports that he can sense his mistress's emotions even at a long distance. The cute boy claims that if the girl is in danger, he will definitely save her. After a while, Noah comes to her room. The apartment provided for the girl was truly luxurious. Kyle informs her that despite all the comforts that Pac provided, she will be watched by a lot of cameras and the door of the room will always be closed. The protagonist does not pay attention to this and begins to admire the large and comfortable bed. Renaud leaves the girl's room and goes to interrogate Lenia Walter. It turns out that the girl is still alive, but has been behaving strangely. The subordinates of the protagonist Brawl and Penelope argue that the detective should rest a little. The man does not listen to the pair and goes to interrogate the main suspect in the theft of the Black Dragon egg. Kyle orders his subordinates not to talk or provoke Eleanor, as well as carefully monitor her diet. After these words, Penelope begins to admire her boss, but begins to suspect the protagonist of getting too close to Asil. After a while, Pac Noah is taken for interrogation in a special room that disarms the effects of magic of any kind. On the way, the protagonist notices Lenia. The girl is perplexed when she learns that the real kidnapper of the legendary egg will be released. Noah tries to talk to Mr. Walter's daughter, but the perpetrator's personal guards prevent her from doing so. Suddenly, Lenia says she doesn't remember anything and apologizes to the young girl. Detective Kyle calls out to the protagonist and tells her it's time for an interrogation. During the conversation, Noah realizes that their dialogue is recorded on video cameras. Suddenly, Kyle starts accusing the girl of all the crimes related to the Black Dragon egg theft. Puck goes into shock, but after a while she realizes that she needs to trust the protagonist and repent for the crimes she did not commit. After a while, the main characters meet each other again and they start talking. Kyle claims that Lenia denies her guilt and behaves very strangely after what happened on the liner. The detective reports that the palace that contained the legendary Black Dragon egg is surrounded by a magical barrier that can recognize the identity that entered the palace. The investigators analyze and find that Lenia did not enter the palace on the day the dragon egg was stolen. Noah accuses Renaud of accusing her of criminal acts she didn't commit. The man claims that this was the only way in which the girl will be able to quickly get out of serious trouble with the law. The detective tells that the girl will not be sent to jail, but will be given an adequate punishment. This will be the arrest of Eleanor's property or corrective labor. It turns out that an important role was played by the Black Dragon, who made a magical connection with a dangerous criminal. It is because of this, the girl will not entail a serious punishment, and the trial, which will be in the near future, will be an ordinary formality before society. Kyle claims that the girl will have to write a letter of contrition. It turns out that the protagonist is obliged to write more than 300 pages with apologies, and only after that the court will give an adequate punishment. When the girl learns about this, Puck begins to resent it. Kyle admits that he did not sleep for more than 4 days to come up with a plan with which he can secure the girl's life. Suddenly, the investigator is informed that Penelope needs Kyle's help. Renaud decides to go to meet with his subordinate, but Noah stops the protagonist and asks him to wait. After a while, Puck manages to write 300 pages of apologies and sets off with the detective. The couple's conversation was being followed by someone. It turns out that Penelope overheard the entire conversation of the main characters with the help of a magic artifact. The girl doesn't understand what the couple is talking about and plans to question her boss. At that moment, the girl hears a knock on the door of the office she is currently in and hides the listening device. Penelope opens the door and sees Adrian. The guy tells her that he arrived at the bureau at the call of the chief investigator, Kyle. The girl informs him that Renaud will not be able to receive guests for the next 2 days because the next day there will be a trial on the case of Eleanor Asil. During the conversation, Penelope hears a phone ringing and goes to the source of the sound. At that moment, Adrian opens the box containing the listening device and takes it for himself. When Kyle's subordinate returns, the young man quickly leaves. The next day, the trial for the theft of the legendary Black Dragon egg begins. The protagonist, together with Kylo, has prepared the words she will utter during her remorse at the trial. For a while, everything goes according to the detective's plan, but suddenly, Adrian enters the building and starts accusing the protagonist of stealing a Black Dragon egg. Park panics and becomes very angry with the young man. At that moment, Mew breaks the wall of the neighboring room and bursts into the courtroom. The girl calms down the cute boy and Adrian begins to argue that the protagonist is unable to contain the powerful force of the Black Dragon's magic. In the end, Adrian suggests to the judge to condemn the girl and put a collar on her that restrains the dragon's magic. In the end, the court gives the verdict to the protagonist. Noah must wear a special device to safeguard the lives of those around her, as well as practice with Adrian every week to harness the legendary magic of the Black Dragon. Also, the judge approves of Kyle controlling the girl. The man decides to lose his authority and help the poor girl. After the trial, Adrian explains that he did it to help Puck. It turns out that because Noah is not in her true body, the girl is unable to control the magic and thoughts of the dragon. For this reason, the protagonist has developed an excessive sense of anger and a thirst to kill. Adrian claims that a special collar will help contain the powerful flow of the Black Dragon's magic. It turns out that the girl can easily break the device, but decides not to do it for the benefit of herself and her surroundings. In the evening of the same day, Kyle meets with Puck and informs him that their car is ready to go to Eleanor's mansion. At that moment, the protagonist starts crying and hugs the detective tightly. On their way to the mansion of a dangerous criminal, the protagonists discuss what happened at the trial. Mayo feels guilty for what he has done. The girl tries to calm the sweet boy down. Puck suggests that Kyle take Mew on a field trip to the security bureau so that the boy learns social norms. Renaud agrees with his companion's idea and argues that a tour for Little Wheel would be beneficial. Upon arriving at Eleanor's mansion, Kyle is about to leave, but Puck manages to convince the detective to stay with her for 1 hour. Renaud prepares dinner for the protagonist and serves it on the table. At this moment, the girl admires the detective and remembers her worthless life in the past world. Suddenly, Puck offers a man to become her personal butler, but Kyle refuses. The detective notices severe abrasions from the collar that restrains the Black Dragon's magic. Renaud treats the young girl's wounds and marvels at her beauty. After a while, Adrian holds a Black Dragon magic containment class for Puck. The main character reads a book about magic in which she learns that dragon magic spans all dimensions and worlds. Once upon a time, the world Noah is in was filled with mages and people with magical abilities. But after the dragons left for other dimensions, the number of people with magical abilities drastically decreased. After reading the book, the girl decides to take a little rest. She thinks about the detective and, suddenly, Adrian realizes it and becomes jealous of Eleanor Asil. Noah realizes that the guy has a soft temper. After these thoughts, Adrian claims to be very interested in Noah. That evening, the main characters have dinner at the same table. Kyle notices that Puck has begun to avoid him. Renaud thinks that the young girl is uncomfortable with him and decides to leave. At this point, Noah becomes very upset. Mew and Kyle begin to have a conversation. The cute boy claims that he feels all the emotions that the protagonist feels. It turns out that the girl strongly did not want the detective to leave. After the conversation, the man decides to apologize to Puck the next time they meet. The next day, Renaud brings the protagonist to a room with major clues from the liner. Noah sees the robot that Mew and Kyle fought. The detective also includes a transcript with an interrogation of a living enemy. The man revealed that similar puppets are manufactured in a factory, the location of which the criminal did not know. It turns out that the robots are given orders by a representative of the Ministry of Magic, who is in a high position. The main characters analyze all the facts and evidence. They realize that the prime suspect in the murder and attempted kidnapping of Noah is Adrian. Puck also deduces that the guy may know that there is another identity in the body of Adrian's lover. Kyle states that his team plans to focus on tracking Adrian and figuring out who he really is. Puck claims that she meets personally with the prime suspect every week. The girl promises to find out information about the Minister of Magic and tell the detective. Suddenly, Renaud claims that he is being sent on a business trip to a city called Noviskosh. It turns out that magical precious metals were used in the production of robots, which are found in the city to which the protagonist will go. At that moment, Penelope enters the room and informs her that the doctor for the medical exam has arrived. Kyle's subordinate didn't know her boss had come with Noah and accidentally revealed the man's secret. Puck immediately realizes that the investigator was injured in the attack on the liner. In the evening of the same day, Renaud talks to Mew. The cute boy states that Noah is very angry with the man, but also very worried about his health. Kyle decides to apologize to the protagonist and goes to her room. The man sincerely apologizes. But at this point, Noah claims that she is very upset by the detective's action. It turns out that the girl wants Renaud to trust her and not hide personal problems. Suddenly, Puck asks the man to undress to examine the wound of the protagonist. Kyle is greatly embarrassed, but still takes off his clothes. The girl immediately realizes that the wound is very deep. The next day, Kyle has to go on an important business trip. Suddenly, the man is informed that because of his close contact with Eleanor Asil, the detective has been demoted, and Kyle is no longer responsible for the trip to Noviskosh. It turns out that a recording of strange and friendly conversations with Puck was circulated by someone, and an article was written for the town newspaper. Penelope claims that all the recordings of the conversations were sealed in a special device that was in the girl's office. Subordinate Kayla recalls that Adrian entered the room. At this time, the protagonist again came to the lessons to study magic. Adrian tells her that he has to go away on a business trip for a while and the girl will be completely free from the lessons. When the guy frees the protagonist, Noah goes after Mew. On the way, the girl meets Lenia and tries to interrogate her again. The girl continues to pretend that she knows nothing, and at that moment, the protagonist decides to check the presence of the mark on Walter's neck. It turns out that Lenia, who was interrogated by Kyle, is an ordinary robot. Pac meets Mweel and the pair decide to go to the Bureau of Investigation building to meet the detective and talk about Lenia. Upon arrival, the protagonists are met by Penelope and told that Kyle has gone to another. The subordinate Renoa tells them what happened. At this time, Kyle and his subordinate named Baul are traveling to another city. The young man provides the man with the schedule of the Minister of Magic's schedule. Suddenly, the protagonist admits that he is in love with Eleanor. Baul is shocked and notices that his boss has changed his clothes. At this point, Kyle announces that he has to get off the train and head to Noviskosh to investigate. Meanwhile, Noah is studying magic again. The girl has to give Mew to Adrian so that the man can tell the scientists about the Black Dragon. Puck decides to investigate Adrian's library to find clues. On the shelves with books, the protagonist finds a book that talks about creating a doppelganger. The girl decides to take a picture of the book and continues her search. Puck stumbles upon a showroom that contains all of Adrian and Eleanor Asil's inventions. It turns out that the guy collaborated with a dangerous criminal and they together developed a project called Replica. The girl remembers that Adrian will soon go on a business trip. The protagonist plans to find Kyle and tell about the evidence she managed to find. After a while, Renaud manages to arrive in Nova Scotia. The man finds a man to take the protagonist to the mines. It turns out that over the past month, many miners have died mysterious deaths. The old man claims that in the depths of the mines there is a monster that kills innocent people. 5 days later, Noah along with Mew also arrive in Nova Scotia. The pair arrive at the office of one of the owners of the mine where the miners disappeared. There, the pack learns that Renaud has been here before. A man at the entrance to the office escorts the protagonist to the office of the mine owner named Colton. Eventually, Puck decides to buy out the cursed mine so there won't be any problems. Suddenly, Will reports that the town is filled with magical spirits that the average person is unable to see. Noah offers to go to an inn to spend the night. The girl gets into the nearest wagon and sets off. As it turned out, the wagon brought Pack and Mew to the mine, which the protagonist bought out. The main miner asks the girl to find a second person to start working. At this point, Noah is approached by Kyle and is very surprised that the girl came to see him. When the protagonists are alone, Puck reveals that Lenia, who is in the capital of the kingdom, is a robot. She also reveals that she managed to find evidence in Adrian's library. After a while, the couple together with Mew descend to the lowest floor, where there is a very deep and beautiful underground lake. The main character is greatly surprised by the fact that the body of water is sparkling. She realizes that the water contains a large amount of magical mana. Kyle tells her that smugglers who were secretly selling magical precious metals were able to stealthily exit the mine by using the lake that flows outward. The protagonists descend to the bottom of the lake and notice markings that indicate the path that miners use to stealthily deliver minerals to their customers. When the protagonists get out on dry land, Noah notices the rails for the wagon. The girl decides to look around a bit, but suddenly Puck is attacked by a wounded man. Kyle and Mew hear the girl scream and rush to her aid. The pair find the protagonist with her clothes stained with blood. The girl regains consciousness and realizes that she attacked the man and injured him badly. Puck notices that the miner is still alive and decides to help him and heal his wounds with Black Dragon magic. Suddenly, a magical fairy starts telling Mew that people are ruining their place of residence. That's why they decided to punish them and lock them up in this place. At this time, the fairy informs Noah that she is succumbing to the influence of the Black Dragon. It turns out that this is due to the fact that the girl is not in the true body that belongs to her. The fairy claims that Puck's body is still alive and is in an unconscious state. Eleanor Asil's body was also alive, but her body left her soul, just like the main characters. The girl wants to regain her true body and the fairy decides to help the special girl. Puck informs Kyle that she has a chance to return to her real body. The man doesn't have time to respond, and at that moment, Mew discovers the living people. The detective manages to question the survivors and learn some information. It turns out that the owner of the mine Kelton knew about smuggling and independently conducted transactions. When people began to disappear, the woman realized that she needed to sell the mine to get rid of responsibility for the illegal sale of precious metals. After saying this, Puck decides to tell Kyle that she bought out the mine with Eleanor Asil's money. Renaud is shocked when he finds out. At that moment, the girl decides to go in search of her body and get it back. The protagonists agree to meet in 2 days at the appointed place. Kyle is very worried about the girl and asks her to be careful. Puck and Mew find themselves in a dimension that unites all worlds. While searching for the body of the protagonist, Noah remembers his worthless life. At that moment, Puck wakes up in a hospital bed in his true body. A member of the medical staff enters the room and is greatly surprised that the girl has regained consciousness. After a while, Noah is picked up by her father and taken to her parents' apartment. The protagonist realizes that now she can live an ordinary life, not to be in constant danger and not to investigate the case of Eleanor's murder. Suddenly, the girl begins to miss the detective. She realizes that the choice depends only on her and decides to return to the world of her favorite novel. The next morning, the girl leaves home and informs her parents that she will be leaving for a place where she will live happily ever after. Puck takes the cute boy to the toy store and lets him buy whatever he wants. At that time, Kyle arrived at the place where the main characters had agreed to meet. It turns out that it has already been more than 3 days since Puck left this world. Renaud begins to worry that the girl will want to stay in her homeworld and never return. At that moment, the detective hears the voice of the protagonist and sees Noah with a beautiful bouquet of flowers in his hands. Dear friends, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel. This is important to me.